The marble floors of Millennium Plaza gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, reflecting the golden light that bathed Chicago's most exclusive shopping destination. At 6:30 a.m., before the first Nordstrom customer would even think about stepping through those polished glass doors, Margaret Maggie Thompson pushed her cleaning cart down the pristine corridors, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the immaculate surface. Another day, another dollar, she thought, adjusting the blue uniform that had seen better years. At 58, Maggie's hands told the story of 3 decades spent scrubbing, mopping, and polishing other people's messes. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes, still held a spark of dignity that no amount of hardship had managed to extinguish. The mall was a cathedral of capitalism. Tiffany & Company's diamonds sparkled behind bulletproof glass, Louis Vuitton's leather goods sat like precious artifacts, and the Apple Store hummed with the promise of tomorrow's technology. For most people, this was paradise. For Maggie, it was simply Tuesday. As she wiped down the brass railings near the Nordstrom escalators, her mind drifted, as it often did, to the son she'd given up for adoption 35 years ago. She'd been just 23, working 2 minimum-wage jobs, sleeping in a friend's basement. The social worker had promised her that baby Michael would have opportunities she could never provide. "You're giving him a chance at a real life," the woman had said, sliding the papers across the desk. Maggie's teenage signature had felt like signing away her heart. By 2 p.m., Millennium Plaza buzzed with its usual afternoon energy. Socialites clutched their Hermes bags, business executives talked loudly into their phones, and teenagers posed for Instagram photos against the backdrop of luxury they couldn't afford. Maggie was restocking the paper towels in the restroom near Saks Fifth Avenue when she heard the commotion outside. Through the slightly open door, she could see a crowd forming near the central fountain, the same spot where she'd eaten her brown bag lunch countless times, watching people live lives that seemed worlds away from her own. "Excuse me. Excuse me." The voice cut through the ambient mall chatter like a knife. "This is absolutely unacceptable." Victoria Ashworth stood in the center of the growing crowd, her perfectly blown-out blonde hair catching the light as she gestured dramatically. At 42, Victoria was everything money could buy, designer everything, professional makeup, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to check a price tag. Her Chanel suit probably cost more than Maggie made in 6 months. "I specifically asked for the burgundy Louboutin pumps in size 7, and this person brings me a size 8 in red." Victoria's voice carried the particular pitch of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Do you have any idea what my time is worth?" Maggie emerged from the restroom, her cart squeaking behind her. She'd witnessed scenes like this before, wealthy customers taking out their frustrations on retail workers who couldn't fight back. Usually, she kept her head down and kept moving. But something about this felt different. The sales associate, a young black woman named Jasmine who couldn't have been more than 22, stood with tears welling in her eyes. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. The system showed we had your size, but when I went to the stockroom." "I don't want to hear your excuses." Victoria snapped, her voice getting louder. "This is Nordstrom, not some discount store in the suburbs. I expect a certain level of service." More shoppers had stopped to watch. Some pulled out their phones, sensing drama. Others whispered behind their hands, creating a circle of judgment around the young employee. Maggie felt something stir in her chest, the same feeling she'd had when bullies picked on smaller kids in the group home where she'd grown up. Without fully realizing what she was doing, she stepped forward. "Ma'am," Maggie said quietly, "maybe if you just..." Victoria's head snapped around like a viper. Her cold blue eyes took in Maggie's uniform, her worn hands, her humble demeanor, and something ugly flickered across her face. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't talking to the help." The word help landed like a slap. The crowd had grown larger now, forming a loose circle around the 3 women. Phones were definitely recording. This was becoming a show. Maggie felt her cheeks burn, but she stood her ground. "I just thought maybe." "You thought?" Victoria laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Honey, you're paid to push a mop, not to think. Maybe you should stick to what you know." The crowd was silent now, watching this social execution with a fascination of people who'd never been on the receiving end of such cruelty. "I was just trying to help," Maggie said, her voice smaller now but still steady. "Help." Victoria stepped closer, and Maggie could smell her expensive perfume, something that probably cost more than Maggie's rent. You want to help? Then clean something. That's what you're here for, isn't it? To clean up after your betters. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. They were all complicit in their silence. Victoria wasn't finished. Look at you, she continued, her voice carrying across the atrium. 50-something years old, pushing a cart, wearing a uniform that's seen better days. This is what happens when you don't apply yourself. When you don't have any ambition. Maggie's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the handle of her cart. The memories came flooding back, nights when she'd worked 3 jobs to pay for community college classes, only to drop out when her mother got sick. Years of choosing between groceries and textbooks. The baby she'd given up because she couldn't provide the life he deserved. You don't know anything about me, Maggie whispered. Oh, but I do. Victoria's voice rose triumphantly. I know exactly what you are. You're a cautionary tale. A reminder of what happens when people don't take responsibility for their lives. The crowd was larger now, maybe 50 people, all watching this public destruction of a human being's dignity. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed almost entertained. A few teenagers were live streaming on TikTok. Jasmine, the sales associate, tried to intervene. Ma'am, please, there's no need to. And you. Victoria spun on the young woman. This is all your fault. Bringing me the wrong shoes, wasting my time. I'm going to make sure your manager knows how incompetent you are. That's when Maggie stepped forward again. Something in her had snapped, not into anger, but into a quiet, fierce protectiveness. She's just a kid, Maggie said, her voice stronger now. She made a mistake. We all make mistakes. Victoria's eyes glittered with malicious delight. She'd found her target, and she wasn't going to let go. Oh, how touching. The maid wants to play hero. She turned to address the crowd directly, like a performer commanding a stage. Ladies and gentlemen, feast your eyes on the future of America. This is what happens when we lower our standards, when we celebrate mediocrity. Maggie felt something inside her breaking. 35 years of holding her head high despite the whispers and looks. 35 years of working honest jobs and treating people with dignity even when they couldn't return the favor. 35 years of wondering if she'd made the right choice about her son. You think you're better than me, Maggie said, her voice carrying now despite her tears. But you're not. You're just luckier. Lucky. Victoria threw back her head and laughed. Honey, luck has nothing to do with it. I worked for everything I have. I went to Yale. I built my own PR firm. I married well. I made smart choices. The crowd murmured. This was getting ugly, but no one seemed willing to step in. And you, Victoria continued, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Maggie, you made poor choices. Look where it got you. Michael baby, I'm so sorry. Maggie's mind transported her back to that hospital room in 1988. She'd been so young, so scared, so alone. The father, a boy from her high school, had disappeared the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy. Her own mother had kicked her out, calling her a disgrace to the family. She remembered holding her son for exactly 1 hour. He'd been perfect, tiny fingers, a tuft of dark hair, eyes that seemed to look right through her soul. The adoption counselor had told her about the couple who would raise him, successful, educated, loving. They could give him everything she couldn't. You're being selfless, everyone had said. You're giving him the best chance. But as the years passed, as she worked her way up from fast food cashier to hotel housekeeper to mall custodian, she'd wondered. Had she given up too easily? Could she have found a way? Now, standing in this temple of wealth while a woman who'd never known real struggle tore her apart in front of dozens of strangers, those old wounds ripped open fresh. You think you know what poor choices look like? Maggie's voice was shaking, but she was still standing. You think you understand struggle? Victoria sensed blood in the water. Oh please. Don't give me some sob story about how hard your life has been. Everyone has problems. The difference is, some of us overcome them. I got pregnant at 17, Maggie said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. The father ran. My family threw me out. I lived in my car for 2 months, working at a diner, saving every penny. The crowd was listening now, really listening. Even Victoria seemed slightly taken aback by this sudden confession. "And you know what I did?" Maggie continued, tears streaming down her face but her voice growing stronger. "I gave my baby to a family who could provide for him. Because I loved him more than I loved myself. Because I wanted him to have chances I couldn't give him." "Oh, how noble," Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its venom. "And now you want a medal for giving up?" "I want you to understand," Maggie said, "that you don't know what someone's carrying. You don't know what they've sacrificed. You don't know what love looks like when it has to let go." That's when the crowd parted. At first, it was just a ripple of movement, people stepping aside without really knowing why. Then the whispers started. "Is that? Oh my God, it's Michael Hartwell. The billionaire? What's he doing here?" Michael Hartwell moved through the crowd like a force of nature. At 35, he commanded attention without trying, 6'2", impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, with dark hair just touched with silver at the temples and the kind of presence that came from boardrooms where billion-dollar deals were made with handshakes. Everyone in Chicago knew who Michael Hartwell was. The tech entrepreneur who'd built Hartwell Industries from nothing. The philanthropist who'd donated millions to children's charities. The man who'd been featured on the cover of Forbes 6 times before his 40th birthday. What they didn't know was that he'd been shopping at Millennium Plaza when his assistant had frantically texted him about a viral video already spreading across social media. A video of a cleaning woman being humiliated by some socialite. A video that had made his blood run cold for reasons he couldn't explain. Michael's adoptive parents had been wonderful, loving, supportive, everything they'd been promised. They'd given him every advantage, the best schools, tutors, opportunities. But they'd also been honest about his adoption, and he'd grown up with a quiet curiosity about the woman who'd given him life. He'd hired private investigators over the years, but the trail had always gone cold. Margaret Thompson, 17 years old, last known address Chicago. It was like she'd vanished into the vast anonymity of minimum wage America. As he'd watched the video on his phone, something in the woman's face had triggered a memory so deep he'd almost dismissed it as imagination. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that looked so familiar. Now, standing at the edge of this crowd, watching this woman defend herself with a dignity that money couldn't buy, he felt something click into place in his chest. What seems to be the problem here? Michael's voice cut through the tension like silk over steel. Victoria turned, and her entire demeanor changed instantly. She'd gone from predator to prey in the space of a heartbeat, recognizing the shift in power dynamics. "Mr. Hartwell," she gushed, extending a hand. "Victoria Ashworth, Ashworth Public Relations. What an incredible coincidence. I saw what you were doing," Michael said coolly, his eyes moving past her to study Maggie's face. Something about her was so familiar it made his chest ache. The crowd had gone completely silent now. This was better than Netflix, a real-life drama playing out in their mall, starring one of the most powerful men in Chicago. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," Victoria backpedaled frantically. "This employee was interfering with customer service, and I was simply—" "You were humiliating a woman in public," Michael said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never needed to raise it to be heard. "For entertainment." He turned to Maggie, and their eyes met directly for the first time. Those eyes. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Maggie stared up at him, and for a moment, the 35 years collapsed. Something in his face, the shape of his eyes, the way he tilted his head slightly when he was thinking. It couldn't be. Could it? "I'm fine," she whispered. "No," Michael said firmly. "You're not fine. No one should be treated like that. Ever." He turned back to Victoria, who was now looking around desperately for an escape route. "Ms. Ashworth, is it?" His voice had gone arctic. "I'm curious about something. You seem to think that a person's worth is determined by their bank account." That's not I didn't mean." Victoria stammered. "Because this woman," Michael continued, gesturing toward Maggie, "this woman you've been tearing apart for the entertainment of strangers, works harder in a day than you probably have in your entire life." The crowd was eating this up. Phones were definitely recording now. This would be on YouTube within the hour. "She gets up at 5 in the morning to come here and make sure this place is clean for people like you. She does honest work with dignity. She treats people with respect even when they can't return the favor. Victoria's face had gone from red to pale to green. Mr. Hartwell, if I could just explain. What's to explain? Michael's voice was cutting. That you think being wealthy makes you a better person? That you think someone's job defines their worth as a human being? He stepped closer to Victoria, and his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the atrium. Let me tell you something about worth, Ms. Ashworth. This woman has more character in her little finger than you have in your entire body. You're being selfless. You're giving him the best chance. The words from 35 years ago echoed in Maggie's mind as she stared at this powerful man defending her. There was something about his voice, something about the way he moved. Michael turned back to her, and this time when their eyes met, she saw it. The shape of his mouth when he was thinking. The way his eyebrows drew together slightly when he was concentrating. The scar on his chin that she remembered from that one precious hour she'd held him, a tiny mark the doctor had said would fade but never disappear. What's your name? Michael asked softly. Margaret Thompson, she whispered. But everyone calls me Maggie. The name hit him like a physical blow. Margaret Thompson. The name he'd carried in his heart for decades. The name on the birth certificate he'd kept in a safety deposit box since he was 18. Maggie, he repeated, and his voice broke slightly on the word. Around them, the crowd was getting restless, sensing something deeper happening but not understanding what. When were you born? Maggie asked, her voice so quiet only he could hear. April 15, 1988, Michael said, and watched her face crumble. Chicago Memorial Hospital, she whispered. Chicago Memorial Hospital, he confirmed. For a moment, the mall, the crowd, Victoria, all of it ceased to exist. There was just a mother and the son she'd given away, recognizing each other across 35 years of separation. Michael. Maggie's voice was barely audible. Mom, he said, and the word carried 3.5 decades of wondering, of imagining, of hoping. The crowd sensed something momentous happening, but they couldn't quite grasp what. Victoria, meanwhile, was frantically trying to process this development and figure out how to save her reputation. I don't understand, she said loudly, desperate to regain control of the narrative. What's going on here? Michael turned to face the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the atrium. This woman, he said, placing a protective arm around Maggie's shoulders, is my mother. The silence was deafening. 35 years ago, when she was barely 18 years old and had nothing, she made the hardest decision a person can make. She gave me up for adoption so I could have opportunities she couldn't provide. Maggie was crying openly now, but she stood straighter under his arm. She worked multiple jobs while she was pregnant, saving every penny to make sure I was healthy. She researched adoption agencies to find the perfect family. She held me for exactly 1 hour before signing the papers, because she knew that if she held me any longer, she might not be able to let go. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Victoria seemed stunned into speechlessness. She gave me everything, Michael continued, his voice strong and clear. She gave me life, she gave me a chance, and she gave me the greatest gift anyone can give, selfless love. He turned to look at Maggie, and his voice gentled. And she's been working honest jobs and treating people with dignity every day since, even when people like Ms. Ashworth here think that makes her less worthy of respect. Victoria tried one last desperate play. But I didn't know. That's exactly the point, Michael cut her off. You didn't know. You didn't know her story, her sacrifices, her character. But you felt entitled to judge her anyway, based on her uniform and her bank account. He addressed the crowd directly now. How many of you stood here and watched this happen? How many of you pulled out your phones to record someone being humiliated instead of stepping in to help? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people had the grace to look ashamed. This woman raised me to understand that how you treat people says everything about who you are. Not your clothes, not your car, not your credit score. How you treat people when they can't do anything for you. How you treat people when no one's watching. He turned back to Maggie, and his voice broke again. I've spent my whole life wondering if I'd ever find you. Wondering if you ever thought about me. Wondering if you regretted your decision. Never, Maggie said firmly, finding her voice again. I never regretted giving you a chance at a better life. But I thought about you every single day. Well, Michael said, smiling through his tears, I had the better life you wanted me to have. But it was never complete without knowing the woman who made it possible. Victoria had gone very quiet, realizing that her public destruction of this woman had just become her own career suicide, broadcast live on social media for the world to see. Michael wasn't done with her. Ms. Ashworth, he said, his voice returning to its earlier chill, I'm curious about your business practices. Ashworth Public Relations, you said? Mr. Hartwell, please. Because I'm wondering how someone who publicly humiliates working people for sport thinks they're qualified to manage anyone's public image. Victoria's face had gone ashen. It was a misunderstanding. No, Michael said firmly. It was character. And you've shown everyone here exactly what yours looks like. He pulled out his phone and, without breaking eye contact with Victoria, placed a call. Jennifer? It's Michael. I need you to compile a list of all companies that currently use Ashworth Public Relations for their PR needs. Yes, all of them. I want to personally reach out to each CEO to discuss better options. Victoria looked like she might faint. Also, Michael continued into the phone, I want to establish a scholarship program. The Margaret Thompson Scholarship for single mothers pursuing education while working full-time jobs. Start with a $10 million endowment. The crowd gasped. Even Jasmine, the young sales associate who'd started this whole thing, was staring in amazement. Michael hung up and turned to the crowd. Here's what's going to happen, he announced. This entire incident has been recorded and is already going viral. Good. Let it go viral. Let the whole world see what happened here today. He gestured toward Victoria. Let them see what happens when privilege attacks dignity. Let them see how easily a person's true character reveals itself when they think no one important is watching. Then he gestured toward Maggie. And let them see what real strength looks like. What real character looks like. What it means to work with dignity and treat people with respect, even when they can't return the favor. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Mr. Hartwell, surely we can work something out. I made a mistake, but... Ms. Ashworth, Michael said quietly, the mistake wasn't what you said to my mother. The mistake was thinking that there are people in this world who don't matter. People whose feelings don't count. People who deserve to be humiliated for your entertainment. He stepped closer to her. My mother taught me, through her actions 35 years ago, that every person has dignity. Every person has worth. Every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their circumstances. His voice rose slightly. She learned that lesson as a teenage girl with nothing. You haven't learned it yet, despite having every advantage life can offer. Victoria turned and pushed through the crowd, fleeing toward the exit. The crowd parted for her like she was contaminated. As the crowd began to disperse, people approached Maggie with a mixture of apology and admiration. Several offered to help if she ever needed anything. Others simply shook her hand and told her they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. Jasmine, the young Nordstrom employee, came over with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry you went through that because of me. Oh honey, Maggie said, pulling the girl into a hug. You didn't do anything wrong. You just made a small mistake. We all make mistakes. Michael watched this interaction with a smile. This was the woman who'd raised him in spirit, even from a distance. This was the compassion that had shaped his understanding of how to treat people. Jasmine, he said, how long have you been working here? About 6 months, sir. I'm saving up for college. What do you want to study? Business management. I want to open my own boutique someday. Michael pulled out his business card. Call my office tomorrow. We have an internship program for students interested in business. It pays well and offers college tuition assistance. Jasmine stared at the card like it was made of gold. Mr. Hartwell, I don't know what to say. Say you'll work hard and treat people with dignity, Michael replied. That's all anyone can ask for. As the last of the crowd dispersed, Michael and Maggie found themselves alone by the fountain where she'd eaten so many solitary lunches. I can't believe it's really you, Maggie said, still crying. I can't believe I found you, Michael replied. Actually, you found me. If you hadn't stood up for that girl, if you hadn't shown the kind of character that raised me. I was so scared, Maggie admitted. For 35 years, I was scared that you'd hate me for giving you away. Hate you? Michael's voice was incredulous. Mom, you gave me everything. You gave me life, you gave me opportunity, and you gave me parents who taught me about love and family. But most importantly, you taught me about sacrifice. He took her hands in his. Do you know what I've been missing my whole life? The woman who was strong enough to make the hardest decision in the world because she loved me more than she loved herself. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other and crying. What happens now? Maggie asked. Now, Michael said, you never clean another floor unless you want to. Now you let me take care of you the way you took care of me before I was even born. I don't need taking care of, Maggie said with a small smile. I need family. You've got family, Michael assured her. You've always had family. I've just been looking for you. As they walked out of the mall together, Michael's assistant approached with her phone. Sir, the video is already trending on every platform. Justice for Maggie is the #1 hashtag on Twitter. The story is being picked up by CNN, Fox, ABC, everyone. Michael looked at his mother. Are you okay with this going public? Maggie thought for a moment. If it helps even one person think twice before they humiliate someone else, then yes. Good, Michael said. Because I want to make sure this story gets told right. Later that evening, Michael posted a video on his own social media accounts. The video quickly went viral, garnering millions of views within hours. Today at Millennium Plaza in Chicago, something incredible happened. A woman named Victoria Ashworth publicly humiliated a hard-working cleaning woman named Margaret Thompson, thinking she could get away with it because of the difference in their social status. What she didn't know was that she was humiliating my mother. 35 years ago, my birth mother made the ultimate sacrifice. At 17, with nothing but love in her heart and hope for my future, she chose to give me up for adoption so I could have opportunities she couldn't provide. That decision shaped everything I am today. The woman Victoria tried to destroy in public is the same woman who worked multiple jobs while pregnant to ensure I was healthy. The same woman who researched adoption agencies to find me the perfect family. The same woman who held me for exactly 1 hour before signing papers that broke her heart but gave me my future. Today, I watched her defend a young employee with the same courage she showed 35 years ago when she put my needs before her own pain. This is what real strength looks like. This is what real character looks like. This is what unconditional love looks like. Margaret Thompson has spent 35 years working honest jobs, treating people with dignity, and wondering if she made the right choice. Today she found out that she raised me to be exactly the kind of person she hoped I would become, someone who stands up for others, someone who understands that every person has worth, someone who knows that how you treat people says everything about who you are. To everyone who watched this happen, I challenge you to be better. Stand up when you see someone being mistreated. Understand that you don't know what someone has been through or what they've sacrificed. Treat people with dignity, not because of what they can do for you, but because it's right. To Victoria Ashworth and everyone like her, wealth is not character. Status is not worth. How you treat people when they can't fight back is the true measure of who you are. And to the woman who gave me life, thank you. For your sacrifice, for your strength, for your love, and for showing me today what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Share this story. Let the world know that every person matters. Every person has dignity. Every person deserves respect. If this story moved you, please like, share, and comment below. Let's start a conversation about how we treat each other. Let's do better. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about real people doing extraordinary things with ordinary courage. Remember, you never know what someone has been through. You never know what they've sacrificed. You never know when your kindness might change everything. Choose kindness. Every time. The video ended with footage of Michael and Maggie walking out of the mall together, her arm linked through his, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. Within 48 hours, the video had over 50 million views across all platforms. Victoria Ashworth's PR firm lost 80% of its clients. The Every Person Matters movement became a global phenomenon. And Margaret Thompson, who had spent 35 years wondering if she'd made the right choice, finally got her answer. She had raised a son who understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in how you treat other people. And sometimes, Love that lets go comes back in the most unexpected ways. Don't forget to like this video if it moved you, share it to spread the message, and subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage, kindness, and the power of treating every person with dignity. Comment below with your own stories of unexpected kindness or times when someone stood up for what was right. What would you have done? Tell us in the comments.